Howdy, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Dunn,
And this is Miss Sarles.
and today we're going to be talking about percent applications. So if we don't really know what that means, Ms. Sarles, what do you think of when you think of percent applications?
Well, it's when you're going to apply your percents, like when you're shopping and you have a discount, they may say it's 30% off. You also have sales tax. You have to pay a sales tax on anything that you buy. And then also when you're leaving a tip at the restaurant, you'll need to know how to do your percents.
Yes, because we usually leave a percentage of our bill. We don't leave a flat amount, or ideally you shouldn't. We have a foldable that you were given. It was just a piece of paper. If you lost it, all you have to do is cut out a piece of paper and glue it in. We are using proportions to help us solve percent applications, and proportions might be a word that you haven't heard of before. So, Ms. Sarles, what's another word that we could use for proportions?
Equivalent fractions.
Yes, equivalent fractions. It's just two fractions that are equal to each other. Now, we hopefully have seen this part to whole relationship is equal to percents out of 100. And this 100 always stays there because I know that percents are always out of 100. So part over whole is the whole given amounts. If it was in the case of buying clothes, it would be how much the clothes cost. And the part would be what our discount is after we take the percentage. Another way that we can think of that is an is over of relationship. So sometimes when you see in the words, in the wording of a phrase, you'll see the is and the of. The is attached to the part, and the of is attached to the whole amount. And the percent's always going to have that percent sign. You always put it over 100. Okay, so we've done a few examples of this. Let's look together at our first example. Our first example says, what is 30% of 150? So I have my percentage, and I have my of, which is my whole amount, because it has of 150. So I went ahead and I drew my percent bar. We've used these before. They go from 0 to 100. And where would I put that 150, Ms. Sarles?
The 150 would go over the 100% because it was the total amount.
And how are we going to figure out 30% of 150?
Well, I would go back to our benchmark amounts that we used last week and go with tens.
All right, that's a very good idea. So I'm going to go ahead and mark off 10% here, because I know that I can get from 100% to 10% by doing what?
By dividing by 10.
So we're going to go this direction, we're going to divide by 10. So I do the same thing up here, and I'm going to divide by 10. So 150 divided by 10 would be what, Ms. Sarles?
15.
15. Now, that's 10%, but I want to go to 30%. So that's 20%, that's 30%. How do I get from my 10% to my 30%?
Well, you can do it two ways. You can go from 10 and then add to 20 and 30, but the quicker way would be using a one-stir of 3. 10 times 3 is 30.
Very good. So my times 3, my one-stir of 3, again, I do it on the top and the bottom. That's why it's a one-stir. And then 15 times 3 would be
$45.
$45. So 30% is 45. Now let's look at that using this part to whole relationship. So if I have my equivalent fractions, I'm going to draw my equivalent and my two fractions, my two proportions. I'm going to put my 100 here because that's always there. And I have a part, a whole, and a percent, so I need to know which ones I do have. Well, I see the percents there, so I'm going to go ahead and put that 30. But where do I put the 150 for this problem?
Well, it says of 150, and of always goes on the bottom, is over of, so 150 would be on the denominator.
Okay, and then we need to fill in this space right here. So we're filling in that blank. Now I have an equivalent fraction. I'm trying to get from 150, or from 100 to 150. Can I do that at this time? Can I find a one-stir that matches with that?
No, you don't have a one-stir that'll get you from 100 to 150.
So what could I do to make it easier on myself to be able to get there?
Well, you can reduce the 30 over 100 by 10.
Okay, so I'm simplifying this 30 hundredths, which is a fraction, and now it's going to be
3 tenths.
3 tenths. Now I have 10 to 150. Can I do 10 times something to get me to 150?
Yes, 10 times 15.
So times 15. So my one-stir is now 15. So I'm going to do the 15 up here as well. And again, 3 times 15, just like up here,
$45.
is $45. So what is 30% of 45? That would be $45. That would be my answer. Okay, let's go down and look at our next example. This one is 32 is what percent of 128? Okay, so if I'm looking back up here, I'm going to go to my is over of. I have 32 is, so I have my is. What percent? I don't have my percent, but I know my of is 128. Okay, so this doesn't give me my percentage, so I feel like maybe using a percent bar is not the best option, but we could use this proportion up here. So I'm going to again draw my proportions. I know my 100 is here. And Ms. Sarles, will you help me fill in, where does the 32 go?
Sure, 32 is, so it's going to be on your numerator. And then of 128, that'll be on your denominator.
Okay, and my percent is my unknown, so that's what I'm going to solve for. Now this fraction doesn't look very kind, and I don't know really how I'm supposed to get from 128 to 100. So again, could I simplify this fraction?
You could simplify that fraction. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, but that is one way we could work this particular problem.
Okay, so she's right. You could kind of do these two different ways. The thing about having equivalent fractions and proportions is there are more than one way to solve them. If we decided to simplify this fraction, we could get down to an easier number to divide, but perhaps we couldn't. If we couldn't simplify this, what is another way that we could solve this proportion?
Well, we would cross multiply and then divide. That means cross multiply, you would multiply your 32 times 100, and then you would get that answer,
Which
which
is,
is 3,200, and then you would divide by the 128.
okay, and if we did that, what would we get for an answer?
You would get 25%.
So our percentage is 25. So 32 is 25% of 128.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so we're going to see a lot of different ways to do these is over ofs. We've shown you using the percent bar. We've shown you using proportions. We can either do that through one-sters or through cross multiplication. So you have a number of ways to look at that. Let's go over to the back side. Remember, we have a whisk. The whisk is I watched the video, now I'm going to write a summary or a question. This right here is required. We are not doing this too often. Make sure that you have a whisk that is a statement. It needs to be a sentence. If you write a problem, you don't have to solve it out, but I need a sentence from everyone. And below that, for check for understanding, we just have 2 of them. Your first one is what is 15% of 30? And your second one is 45 is what percent of 450? Try to do these 2 problems. We'll go through them on Friday and make sure that your whisk is done. Thank you.
Thank you.